Good morning, everybody. I hate when I just don't even pay attention when I hit the live stream, but thanks for joining me this morning. Sorry, I am so drastically late. Been a crazy morning and a crazy October. I hope that it's going well for you guys. And I am super excited because this week I'm going to be talking about heart health, and it happens to be my favorite topic. So I want to go over a few things and just help you guys understand what could be happening if you have hypertension, if you have cardiovascular disease, if your heart rate's just running high, you have a blood pressure of 130 over 80 or higher, and you've been going through medication after medication, you know it's causing other problems throughout your body, but you just don't know how to get it dealt with. Or maybe you have this high blood pressure, but you don't understand what it's costing you. Let's talk, because the root cause of almost all hypertension, 95% of hypertension, good morning, Christine, is linked to insulin resistance. So an insulin resistance is a food-borne disorder. So if we work backward and say, let's go to the top end, cardiovascular diseases. We are losing well over 50,000 people a day to cardiovascular diseases. Over 19 million people a year die due to cardiovascular disorders and diseases. And when scientists say that 80% of that is linked to hypertension, long-term hypertension or high blood pressure, that's our first link, right? So 80% of this 50,000 people are linked to this hypertension long-term. And then when we look at that, 95% of hypertension is linked to long-term insulin resistance. So if we start to step it back, instead of just panicking to take a look at this trying to get the blood pressure down, that's a good ideal, right? But if we really go back to the root for most of us with hypertension or high blood pressure and cardiovascular diseases is insulin resistance. And so I'm living proof of that. For years, since my late 20s, I've been having high blood pressure. In my mid 30s, I was already having blood pressure that was 180 over 150 or higher. I went to the emergency room. They didn't believe me that it was that high. They took my blood pressure multiple times, and then they immediately ran me back to a room, and they did all kinds of tests. They thought I was gonna, not be here. And that was in my 30s. And I lived with that for 20 more years, on and off of different medications, dual therapy, cycling through things, trying to figure out what was going to cure this random hypertension it wasn't random. It was just like they couldn't figure it out, but it was there every day. The best we could get it down to was about 150 over 110. And the amazing thing is, 2 years ago, I started the protocol that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And I did it to help my diabetes. I did it to hopefully lose some weight. As a result, 2 years later, now I wake up every day with a blood pressure that's 112, 116 over something in the 70s, like 72, 74, every single day. And I haven't been on medications in 2 years. So when statins failed me and water pills failed me and all the other things that they cycled me through were not helping me save my heart. And my blood pressure was so bad, I literally woke up in the night thinking that I was going to die and that my kids were going to be left finding me. And I'm too young for that, right? But the random thought and the reality of my day-to-day life was that I was very aware what that blood pressure would do to my heart, and I was terrified, but nobody seemed to be able to fix it. So when this protocol that I'm going to share with you started working on my blood pressure as well as everything else that it changed for me, I was shocked. And so that's part of why I'm here now talking about it. That's part of why I do what I do, because for me, all of the other things, there's probably 16, 20 other things that I got better from by just doing this protocol, by just addressing the food environment and what's happening in our bodies. Um, but reversing my blood pressure and now like having hopes of living, because I have crazy dreams. I want to live to be, I've told my kids for years, I want to live to be 150. I want to be that old grandma with a crooked stick walking around banging people on the head saying, listen up, um, to my great grandkids. So I have a lot that I still want to do in life. And it changes everything from 2 years ago, feeling like maybe I had 10 years left to live and I better start preparing for what I was going to leave my family to, knowing that I can live for much longer and making plans for what I can do in these next 50 years that I plan to be around or more. That's life changing. And so I know that there are so many other people who are out there suffering, and maybe you're giving up because maybe you're like me. Doctors haven't figured out what's going on. I have a sore elbow for some reason. Um, and you're giving up. Like, this is just my life and it's going to be what it's going to be. And it doesn't have to be that way, you guys. So all week, I'm going to be doing some very specific videos. So watch for the videos here on TikTok and on YouTube and Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels as well, because I'm going to dive in and break down why hypertension is caused by insulin resistance, step by step. And there's like 5 or 6 different ways that insulin resistance is contributing to this myriad of things that happen to cause you to have high blood pressure. And by the way, I'm going to stop right here and say, I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I call it science curious. I like to study. If you do the Clifton strength stuff, I'm a learner. It's one of my very top strengths. So I am very curious about things. So I do a lot of studies. I have, gosh, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books open here, 6 in the other room, and a couple by my bed. I'm constantly reading something, looking up things. So this information I'm going to be bringing to you comes directly from Dr. Ben Bickman. He has a chapter in this book where he talks about cardiovascular diseases and the link to insulin resistance. So this is from a guy who studies metabolic syndrome, who studies metabolism, who understands very much how much insulin is impacting our lives and all the ways that it does through science. So that's where all of the information is coming from, but watch for those videos. So I'm going to go over a couple of things, you guys, because you don't have to have this hypertension if, again, 130 over 80 or higher. So I'm going to tell you a couple of the ways just in brief, and then we're going to go back and deal with a couple of things, like what is insulin resistance, what does it look like, all of that. But first, how insulin resistance is driving your blood pressure up. The one thing that I love to address is we have blood vessels, right? And they're made up of several layers of cells. The innermost cell of your blood vessels is called the endothelium. Now, through certain actions in insulin resistance, it is creating too much growth. So insulin resistance, most cells don't want to take up insulin anymore. Some cells are taking up too much. In this case, the endothelium, that innermost wall of your blood vessels, is taking up too much insulin, which means that it's growing too much. So now you have a blood vessel that should have an opening like this in the middle, but that inner wall is thickening. So now you have a very, very tiny opening. So now even with a normal blood pressure, you have less space to push that pressure through or that volume through. So your pressure goes up. That's number one. Then you have things like your body can't get rid of salts. Your kidneys can't get rid of salts in the presence of insulin. This is why doctors tell you to watch salts. Guess what? I don't watch my salts. I eat what I want. I don't count the sodium on my nutrition labels. I don't do any of that, and my blood pressure is normalized. So when your kidneys are malfunctioning, they can't offlet the salts into your urine, and instead it retains it, puts it back in your blood. Now, where salt goes, water goes. Now, not only do you have a smaller blood vessel, but you have a vessel that's trying to carry way more volume because there's more in your blood than normal. And then to top it off, your body can't produce nitric oxide, the substance that allows your blood vessels to open up. So now you have a constricted blood vessel with too much volume and it can't open up. So do you see where we're starting to have a problem with blood pressure? Also, with insulin resistance, it's causing you to be in a state of constant fight or flight mode, right? So you're constantly a little bit agitated. So you have anxiety, you have depression, you have a number of other things, but it's constantly causing this pressure on your heart because you're in this moment of, I gotta run all the time. But your blood vessels aren't opening up to deal with that pressure. So those are some of the ways, and I'm going to go over those in more depth and try to explain why those mechanisms are working in some videos this week. So watch for those. But if you know anybody that's suffering with blood pressure, let them know, because You guys, it doesn't take statin pills and it doesn't take water pills and it doesn't take all of this other stuff. Yes, we need to get better sleep. Yes, we need to de-stress and do meditation and not allow ourselves to get angry. But at the root of all of that even is insulin resistance. So I've gone over multiple times how insulin resistance affects your brain and causes you to start feeling more anxious. That's having an effect on your heart. There's so many, 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 many ways that it's causing this. So what is insulin resistance? Well, it's where you have too much insulin, a hormone that is, there's two things. Most people will tell you it's a fat storing hormone. Somewhat it is. It's an energy carrying hormone. It's an energy transport. It's a hormone that comes in and grabs the energy that we've eaten and transports it to all the cells of the body. So those cells have energy because what makes our cells grow and regenerate? Energy. Why do we eat? Energy. So insulin is an important hormone and we need it. If we didn't, we wouldn't have type 1 diabetics who are suffering because they can't produce it. But the problem is that we're converting too much insulin. Type 1 diabetics can be using too much insulin in the face of our food environment today. So we have way too much insulin in our system. That's causing this thing called insulin resistance. On the other end, insulin resistance starts to become prediabetes and then diabetes type 2. But like I said, even type 1 diabetics can have insulin resistance. And then there's Alzheimer's disease, which they're now calling type 3 diabetes because it still is resultant from insulin resistance. So how do we get to insulin resistance? What happens? Why do we have too much insulin in our system? I want to say that yes, we have some culpability in this, right? We as human beings, as a race, or as a environment, we need to be taking better care of ourselves, and we don't. We've gotten to this place in life where we just like hand off our care to everyone else all the time, and then sit back and say, "Well, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know why it's like this. I didn't care to take care." We have to care about ourselves and our bodies enough to understand what's happening. Now, not everyone has the opportunity and the chance to have an organic garden or buy from organic shops or eat and food prep all that way. So I'm not talking about any crazy mad change to your life that you just feel like, "Ugh, I can't do this. I have a family of 5, we have busy lives. My husband works, I work, I'm a single mom, whatever." And you just feel like you can't do it. The protocol I'm going to share with you is going to tell you how. But what's happening is the food that we're eating now converts into energy or glucose in our system far quicker than it ever has in history. And why is that? Why is our food converting into energy too quickly now? Because we've modified it, because we've changed it, because we've made it far different than it was ever meant to be. And so this is where it gets into, even if you're an organic eater, you're having some of these issues because that food you're eating, unless it's heirloom and you've grown it yourself, it still is converting to energy too quickly. So what's happened is we've stripped things like fibers are the most important thing. Fibers are in your carbohydrates to slow down the delivery of them from converting in your system. And when we've stripped out fibers, now what's happening is those carbohydrates and that fructose that we're eating through fruits and vegetables, or fruits, sorry, not vegetables, fruits converts so much quicker in our body that our body's struggling to keep up with this conversion. So our liver starts taking a load on it. Our heart, as I said, starts taking a load as a downline result of all of this stuff. So insulin resistance comes from our food, and it's not just the boxed and bagged and canned and all of that food. You guys, there are a lot of foods down the middle aisles that you still need. Like I get coconut oil, I get olives, I get a number of other things, like white navy beans that, because I don't take time to cook my own. I would love to. There was a time in life when I did, but I don't now. So there are a number of things down the middle aisles you can eat, but the things that you shouldn't eat, we all know those. Pop-Tarts, Oreo cookies, bagged, boxed cereals. You guys, cereals are as bad as junk food. And yet we wake up and give it to our kids every morning, and we think we're doing something healthy by giving them cereal and fruit juice. What? You're giving them diabetes is what you're doing. And if you want to know why, I'll tell you. But hey, Yashi, thank you. So we just need to be more mindful of what we eat, but also understand that even being more mindful of what we eat, most of us, I would think more than 80% of us are not are not in an environment and a space where we can just regulate all of that. Like as much as I know and I would love to do all of that, I myself don't do as well with it as I should because just time and lifestyle and all of that. So I actually had somebody asking me this weekend, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, because I didn't have to change my diet drastically to change my blood pressure. I'm doing a lot of things now because I understand more. And so one of the other things I love with this protocol is that in my experiences, it's a thing that helps you get started where you're at. I'm not, if you're getting the protocol and getting coached by me, then I'm not making you make drastic changes right away unless there's something going on that dictates that. You start stepping into it because I think of it like this. We're climbing a ladder back towards health, right? We've fallen in this pit of disease and negative health, and almost all disease and disorder that we have today that's lifestyle related is linked to insulin resistance. So I think of it like we're in this pit. Now, somebody throws down a ladder for you to start climbing out. You don't go from the bottom of the pit to ground level in one big leap. You start climbing that ladder. And so that's how I coach people is you climb that ladder because the more you take it step by step, the more consistent you're going to be. For most people. Okay, there are some people who can make that leap and just be like Superman and jump out of that pit, but most of us don't. Okay, so what does insulin resistance look like though? Why is it even important? We're eating food, it's converting to sugar or glucose too quickly. It's causing an excess of insulin in our body. That excess insulin long term causes insulin resistance. So that's great. What's insulin resistance and why should it matter to you? Well, let's talk about the first thing. One of the first things. When you have insulin resistance, you may not know it yet because your doctor is looking for a high A1C and a high glucose. And I'm going to explain to you why that's flawed. Because that high A1C and that high glucose doesn't show up until your insulin has been high long term and you've had insulin resistance in your body long term for up to 14 years. For me, it was probably 30, maybe 40 years that we start looking back at my history and see things and go, okay, well, that was likely insulin resistance, and that was, and that was, and that was. And we can now pinpoint that I've probably been insulin resistant for over 30 years before my A1C and my blood glucose ever went up. So what's happening is when the insulin is delivering this excess energy to your cells, they get tired of it. They're like, stop knocking on my door. I'm tired of hearing from you. I took your stuff yesterday. I took it the day before. I'm no longer hearing from you. I don't want it. So now your cells are resistant. Like I said, some cells are taking up too much, but you have this thing going on in your body where your cells are not getting the energy they need because they're just trained to not listen. It's been too much. And when that happens, that insulin is going to start trying to find someplace else to offload that energy. And does everybody know we have an energy storage system in our body? That energy storage system, do you know what it is? It's our fat cells. Our fat cells are our energy storage system. In history, and Dr. Yao talks about this, a number of doctors, Dr. Lee, Dr. Bickman, all talk about how our fat cells are storage and how we were in history, we went through these times where we had a number of us, depending on where you lived in the world or your genetics lived, you may have had these times during spring and summer where you had an abundance of food, right? And fall harvest time, but then you go through a really hard winter. So the body got used to storing fat so that it had it for lean times. And then we had long periods of basically fasting where we would lean back out. The healthiest survived and the others did not. But we never in history had a time where we were eating as much as we do. So our bodies are not trained for that. They are trained to store some of that. That's our fat cells. So now when insulin starts storing in your fat cells, those sugars in your fat cells, they start to grow. But your fat cells are like every other cell in your body. Once they get so big, think of it like a water balloon. You start to fill up a water balloon, and if you get the water balloon too big, it's going to explode, right? It's either going to explode or it's going to start shooting water back out the top of the balloon before it explodes. Our fat cells are like that. Our fat cells don't want to die either. You guys, no cell in our body really wants to just like explode. So our fat cells are like, oh, I'm way too full. I can't take any more. My storage tank is full, and it starts to spill that glucose back out into the bloodstream. There's a number of things happen when that glucose starts going back out into the bloodstream. Now your kidneys are malfunctioning, your liver is overworking, and you have this starting to spike your blood glucose and your A1C. But it all started with insulin resistance first, and the fat came on as a result of the excess insulin in the body relaying to the excess glucose or energy in the body, and it all trickles downhill. So excess energy, too much insulin, cells shut down, we get heavy or obese. That stops happening because they're full, and now we have diabetes. Okay. So that's kind of that cycle. But what does it look like if you don't have the numbers that say you're diabetic? If you don't have A1C that's high, blood glucose that's high, triglycerides that are high, but you think this kind of sounds, there's some things in here that she says that kind of sound like me. Well, how about I give you some clues that can tell you if this is you? So one of the things I love, guys, I always advocate for you working with your medical provider. If you have a trusted medical provider, always work with them, especially, but make sure they understand this, okay? So if you are having a number of these things, you can tell that this is you. And because it doesn't take medication, it just takes a shift in what we're eating, you can start to address it yourself, okay? So that's where I'm at. Now, when you are starting to be insulin resistant, one of the biggest things that you can tell if you're insulin resistant is a bulging belly. So when we look at my picture from 2 years ago, this was me on the left in the light blue. My belly was definitely bulging out. I was at about 270 pounds. I had hypertension. I had a number of the things I'm going to talk to you about. That belly that bulges, whether I was fat or thin, that bulging belly is a sign of insulin resistance because your brain is cueing your body to store fat in the visceral area or the area underneath your muscle wall in your tummy instead of in the subcutaneous areas, all the other areas that we carry fat. So when that starts happening, when that belly starts poking out, that's insulin resistance. Okay, so know that. If you look down and you're like, oh, that sounds like me, then you're probably insulin resistant. And there's no judgment in here. By the way, you guys, this is just helping you realize what's happening with you so that you can get better. No judgment zone. Okay. So that's one. All right. The one thing that I'm talking about all week this week is hypertension. So if you have a blood pressure of 130 over 80 or higher, you are likely insulin resistant. Since 95% of that comes from insulin resistance, I would just start treating yourself as if you're insulin resistant and understand what changes you need to make to get your insulin back under control and become sensitive, meaning your cells will take up that insulin again. Now, a clinical way, if you guys have lab tests, say you've had an annual physical done, right? And they always do a complete metabolic panel. Really listen to that, complete metabolic panel. Okay, so that's what we're talking about is metabolism, right? So in that panel, there's going to be a number of numbers. Your blood glucose will be in there, your A1C will be in there, but you should also have a lipid panel. You'll have some liver function panels as well. Don't sleep on those either. If they're starting to go up, know that your liver is being taxed because of insulin resistance, most likely. So start addressing your dietary needs and understand that that can help too. My liver panel was going up and it was looking like liver failure. I ended up losing my gallbladder. Nobody caught it. Nobody addressed it. I'm actually the one who caught it on my labs and was like, what? Why have we not addressed this? But now my liver panels are normal. I'm still working to help, in my own mind, help clear up my liver from what I consider years of abuse in my diet. So take your panel. I got off on a tangent. By the way, if you're watching me, know that I get off on tangents. Just say, yo, Misha, back on track. So now if you look at those panels and you find your triglycerides, locate that number, and then you'll have an HDL, or a high density lipoprotein, and then a lipid, or a high density lipid and a low density. So find your HDL and your LDL. You want to find your HDL. Find that number. I know everybody talks about the LDL being the important one, but for this calculation, we're not going to pay attention to that. You want your HDL. So you take the HDL and the triglycerides, divide your triglycerides by your HDL. If the number is 1.5 or lower, you're probably safe. But if you're still having symptoms, start addressing it. Now, that's according to Bickman. The NIH says 2. So Bickman says 1.5, NIH says 2. Okay, so you want your numbers below that either way. I would say 1.5, since Bickman is the specialist in the field. And then if you're between 2 and 3, look, you're starting to have a problem. You probably want to address it before you start having malfunction in your body and damage in your body. If it's 3 or higher, Houston, you have a problem, start addressing it, okay? So those are some of the top 3 ways: bulging belly, high blood pressure, and then this calculation, okay? Some of the other top ways for telling you're insulin resistant: if you have dark skin patches on your elbows, knees, neck, under your arms, in your groin, even like around your ankles where your shoes rub, around where your bra line rubs, or your waistline where your waistline your rubs, that's a sign of insulin resistance. If you have skin tags on the underarms, in the neck, and the groin, that's a sign of insulin resistance. Now, with skin tags, that's one of those cells that's taking up too much insulin, and that's why you get skin tags. They're not cancer. They're an overgrowth of keratinocytes. So when you start to address your insulin resistance and start to become more insulin sensitive, those will shrink away. They'll go down, and then you don't have to have them lasered off. You don't have to have them cut off. You don't have to have any one of that. Can your A1C be low and still be? Yes, absolutely. Your A1C can be low and still be insulin resistant. Absolutely, because that A1C is a shot over time of what your blood glucose looks like. And remember, your blood glucose isn't going to go up until the cells are all resistant and not taking it up, until the fat cells are not taking it up and it's spilling it back out into the bloodstream. So your A1C can absolutely be low and you still be insulin resistant. We now recognize with my labs, because I was obese, but I was working out like 6 days a week, 3 hours a day, because I was a world champion power lifter. And I still had insulin resistance, but my A1C was great. My lipids were great, and my blood sugars were great, but I was still having my joints failing. My hair was falling out. My eyesight was going. I was starting to have neuropathy. I had vertigo. I was having periodontitis. I had this high blood pressure. Those are all symptoms. But my A1C, my blood glucose, and my triglycerides were all normal during that time. Now, had anyone known and addressed that with me, I may not have had 3 joint replacements, because this does lead to deterioration of your joints. It does lead to, failing kidneys, failing liver, all of those things. Hey, JGOT. So it does absolutely link into those. So I'm going to give you some other cues. You guys, there is one test. I didn't mention this. If you want to go in to the doctor and just say, I think I might be insulin resistant, I want to know, what I'm going to encourage you to do is go have an insulin resistance test. It's called a fasting insulin test. They may call it a HOMA, HOMAIR test, HOMA-IR. So that's the test that they're going to be able to tell if your insulin levels are high or not. Now, some doctors I've heard talk about that, although that works most of the time, there are some instances where people may still have these symptoms, and that test and the calculation I gave you look normal. So use those first. If you still are having symptoms, then still just address your diet. So Dr. Fung, by the way, I have this book open because I've been looking at his recipes. I'm working on some things, but Dr. Fung wrote this book and the Diabetes Code Cookbook, the Diabetes Code, the Obesity Code, the Cancer Code. He also wrote a piece in Dr. Bickman's book. Anyway, he says you cannot fix a dietary disorder with medicine, okay? With medication, you're not going to fix a dietary disorder. That's not addressing the root cause. That's forcing your body into some actions so that those numbers look good on your reports. Um, Skinny people with flat bellies can be insulin. Yes, they can. So um, there's a smaller amount of those, but you guys, insulin resistance, don't rely on if a person is obese, they're insulin resistant. Okay, I'm not obese, so I must not be insulin resistant. I'm lean, I'm healthy, I'm not insulin resistant. Because I have family members that are lean and have always been lean, and they were insulin resistant. Okay, so it causes some other dysfunctions in your body, and it's going to look different in different people. Now, the other thing I want to say is a study in 2018 said that 88% of us were metabolically unhealthy. 88%. So you'll hear a lot of people throughout the number that only 12% of us are healthy. But the more interesting thing is that 4 years later, in 2022, there was another study done, and that study says that only 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy, and that less than 7% of us are metabolically healthy now. So that's a 5% change in 4 years. I've talked about some other things, like it's causing kids to go into puberty too quickly. It's causing fertility problems. It's causing a number of other problems, not just heart health. That's what I've been talking about this week, but it causes problems with your gastrointestinal system, with your reproductive system, with your memory and cognition, and whether you're anxious, depressed, ADHD, whether it's exacerbating autism, causing exacerbations in Parkinson's, or even causing autism. All of those things are linked to insulin resistance. And some people are pretty lean when they come on with insulin resistance, and others, most are not. Most will have a bulging belly. If you're catching it early on, hopefully you don't have that bulging belly yet. And when we talk about a bulging belly, it doesn't have to be as big as pregnant. But if you start noticing that you're losing your waistline and that your tummy's starting to poke out, that's a sign. So some other signs you can tell, and it may or may not apply to you. So if you are wondering if you're insulin resistant and you're lean, then I would do that HOMA IR test. But that's what I would do. So some other things that you could tell if you're insulin resistant or not are, like, if you're having that neuropathy I talked about, you're just having some numbness in your extremities or anywhere that your doctor just cannot explain. That was happening to me. I was losing sensation in my right arm. Had pins and needles in my feet. Those were painful. I had swelling in my feet. I had swelling in my knees. That's signs of insulin resistance. Those all came on before I ever got diagnosed with diabetes. By the way, my diabetes has been reversed as well. Um, so those are signs. If you're having constant headaches, even leading into migraines, and you've never had a history of migraines, that can be a clue that you're insulin resistant, because insulin resistance happens in your brain as well as your body. So we all tend to like think of our body as like from here down, but we need to start realizing that it's all connected. So if this down here is insulin resistant, this up here is being insulin resistant too. So that means depression, anxiety, um, panic attacks, and some of these other neuropsychological disorders that we can have going on, because it's actually causing a malfunction of how neurons transfer in the brain, as well as how dopamine is produced and taken up in the brain. And so it causes a lot of issues there as well. So feeling depressed, like you just can't get out of it, like you're tired all the time. Uh, yeah, let me talk about that, Bushra. So you're probably insulin resistant. So Bushra just asked, is there any connection between prediabetes and perimenopause? So perimenopause, you're already starting to have a downregulation of most of your sex hormones, right? Now, let me go back to this part in a bit, but PCOS and erectile dysfunction are signs of insulin resistant. So if you're lean and have either one of those, and you're still lean now, you're still insulin resistant. So in that stage, you're also having this thing where this hormone of insulin has probably been high for a long time. The biggest links are time for this, with perimenopause and prediabetes now. But when you have a dysregulation of your sex hormones, and you're starting to have some of these things of not sleeping well and whatnot, it can exacerbate insulin resistance. You guys, there's so many things besides just our food. I want to say our food is the biggest driver, but do you know head injuries can cause you to start being insulin resistant in the brain, and then that starts causing insulin resistance everywhere else. Dysregulation of hormones can cause some insulin resistance. Excess cortisol can drive you into insulin resistance. Inflammation from injuries and surgeries can cause insulin resistance. So it's not that you're I'm gonna murder your name. Sorry, Akuoko Hansen. Can your nerve issue go away when your insulin is no more? Yes, it has for many people. So again, my feet were swollen and painful. I'll find that picture really quick. Before I started the system, and now my feet don't have that pain. I don't have problems walking. I don't have problems with any of that anymore. This was my feet, and then that numbness in my arm has gone away, and I have numbers of people who say the same thing. So on the top, you can see my feet are swollen. Let me get this pulled up a little bit. And starting to bruise, and they were painful. I had to wear a size bigger shoe. I couldn't wear regular socks. I had to wear diabetic foot socks, but those feet were like pins and needles, painful all day long within a short time of me waking up. The bottom picture is there because I'd been on and off planes all day. So you know that that change in elevation causes a change in that swelling if you have this neuropathy and edema going on. My feet were normal size. They didn't swell up out of my shoes. They weren't painful. This was, I got home, I took my shoes and socks off to settle in for the night after being on planes for about 12 hours, and my feet looked normal. You can see there's no swelling, none of that. But I was insulin resistant a year, or insulin sensitive a year later. So does it change that? Yes. So for me, this arm, I was having a hard time holding, like this is a little light, but like holding a glass for like a glass of milk, a glass of water, whatever. I couldn't hold it. It would start to slip out of my hand. I now have no problem holding anything with this hand. It was painful. It was numb. It was like it was like a phantom arm. We did a number of medical tests to try and figure out what was going on, and we couldn't figure it out. But about a year after starting the system, not only did my feet normalize, that I don't have that numbness in this hand or that arm anymore at all. As well as pain. I was on 3 different pain medications on top of the other 10 medications I was on. And I would cycle through those because I was in so much pain, I just couldn't sleep. I don't take any pain medications to sleep. I don't take any pain medications at all, outside of some Tylenol occasionally if I get a sinus infection from environmental allergies, and even those have gotten better. Is it a panacea? No. But do most of these things link into our gut being unhealthy and this excess insulin in our system? Yes. What foods am I eating? Okay, so you guys, I'm going to stop real quick and I'm going to talk about the protocol. So I do have an ebook. Let's show you guys that, because you can download this ebook and this will tell you basically how to eat. I have been very resistant to writing a program for people, but I'm starting to write a cookbook because I've had so many requests. You guys, you get to eat what you like, but I'm going to share that protocol. So if you go to my TikTok profile, there you go, my TikTok profile, or if you're on Facebook, YouTube, you're going to find it there as well. But TikTok, you're going to go to my profile, look for this link right below these red light symbols. YouTube, it's right on my, I'm not on my page. So let's go. Now you guys get to see the stuff I look at, right? Okay, so it's right on my page. And then Facebook, it's the same thing. Vibrant Living with Misha, you'll find the link there. But you go there, you'll be able to download this ebook, the 6 simple steps, and I'll go over those with you quickly when I'm done with the rest of this. You guys, what I did, and I didn't change my diet. I didn't do any drastic, crazy, any fasting and stuff for the first 2 years. I've just recently adopted that as I'm working to get my body healthier. But for the first 2 years, to reverse all of that stuff, I didn't do anything insane. What I did was I did a tea in the morning. This tea helps give me back mental clarity and energy because it has a component in it that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Not everything can. This one thing called chlorogenic acids can. It helps with normal uptake in insulin in the brain. It helps with anxiety and depression in the brain. It helps give you a feeling of calmness and elevated mood. So that is there. But it also is helping shut down your hunger so that you're not wanting to eat as much, so that I can do a 16/8 fast. Because how many of you guys feel like you hear about these fasts and you're like I was, like, yeah, that all sounds great, but no, not likely that I'm going to do that anytime soon. Well, when you do this, it makes it easier for you to get through those times. It's shutting down your hunger. It's allowing you to burn fat for fuel. It's helping you kick out ketones, which are helping you cue to burn fat for fuel, right? That's what ketones are. They're little messengers that say, hey, we're going to go have a party with those fat cells and we're going to use those up. Okay. Instead of let's have a party and store the fat cells, ketones are telling us, hey, it's time to use them up. All right. So this tea does that. And I do some 16/8 fasting, meaning I don't eat for 16 hours. No snacking, no anything. I'll drink water. I'll drink the tea, and then I eat within an 8-hour window. So that means I have my first meal. This morning I had my first meal at 8 a.m. So I will be done eating today by 2 to 4 p.m. and then I just won't eat. Give my gut a little time to digest through and be restful when I sleep, and that's it. Most people will do their 16/8 fast where they have their meal about noon and then they have their last meal about 6 or 7, and that's fine too. Okay, this is just how I've adopted it. Tea in the morning. Then when I do eat, I put this in. This is a pre-meal drink that they've changed the packaging so it fits well in a bottle like this. I mix it up in probably about this much bottle. I never mix it up in a full bottle. And then I just give it like 4 or 5 quick shakes and drink that down. And then I have it again before my second meal. But what this one does is it puts back fibers that have been stripped out of our diet. It's not just any fiber, by the way. There's soluble and insoluble fibers in there, meaning some fibers will soak up water and some fibers won't. So the ones that don't are really good at cleaning you out, right? They're helping you transport stuff out of your system. The ones that do are helping encapsulate and slow down the delivery of that energy that you've eaten. Part of the thing is that we've been stripping fibers out, so that energy, remember I said, delivers too quickly. So what we're doing is slowing down how quickly that energy is delivered into your bloodstream. When that happens, we're lowering the insulin level so it never spikes as high. And I didn't go over that thoroughly this morning, but so that's what this does. Now, when you drink it 10 minutes before you eat, what happens is it thickens up. It doesn't just stay liquidy, it thickens up and it creates this like gel matrix in your gut that starts to expand. So now you're a little bit full before you eat. So if you've had a tendency to overeat, you're less likely to overeat. Also, when you do eat, the food's going to go into that gel matrix, it's going to get stuck in there, and then it's going to hold on to it. So it's like giving a protective coating in your gut so that as things come through, they're not just passing through quickly, they're slowing down. Now, as that slows down, you stay fuller longer. Those sugar levels don't spike your glucose as high. Your insulin never gets spiked as high. That stays low and steady. And now you have this great thing where you haven't spiked your blood. By the way, this reduces a blood sugar spike or the glucose spike by 27% with one packet. With 2 packets, it's reducing your insulin spike by 28%. So it takes your food and turns it basically from a high glycemic to a medium glycemic food, and that's written in the scientific papers that have studied this. So that's what I'm doing to get my insulin resistance under control. But like I said, I have this ebook, so I want to talk about what's in that ebook because there are some recommendations that I go along with that are helping with that. In the beginning, you guys, when I started this to lose the 50 pounds, to reverse my diabetes, to reverse my hypertension, I wasn't eating perfectly. I had a very imperfect life. It was at the end of COVID. I was driving Lyft as a driver because I was no longer working in medical for various reasons. But so I was driving as a Lyft driver, which meant I was driving at night because it was the most productive time for me and make the most use of my money. But that also meant that in a tiny car, that I didn't have room to carry food around for 8 to 10 hours. And so I was often stopping off at any place that was open. And at that time, it was like McDonald's or Jack in the Box. Am I proud of that? Would I suggest that for anyone? No. But that's what happened. When I started, that's where I was eating. During the daytime, I tried to have at least one meal that was great. And then in the evening, I knew that, I was going to grab something that wasn't fantastic, and I still impacted my health. So this isn't you have to be perfect to get better health. Of course, the more perfect you are, the better your health is going to be. We all understand that, right? 6 simple principles, whether you use the protocol or not, this is them. And the ebook is free. That's just my like help you out, like understand what's going on, and help you get on your path. Okay, so download it. I don't care if you do the system, great. I would love that. If you don't, great. Download the book and get your help. Okay, so number one is you want to get fiber first before you eat, every time you eat. And that's because it's doing everything I talked about. Fiber is slowing down the delivery of the glucose and that energy into your system, as well as fats. So it's helping you feel fuller, so you're less likely to overeat. But it takes a variety of fiber. Okay, so you need a really good variety of fiber if you're going to do it without. That's why I supplement, because I can't always guarantee that I'm going to do that. And then you want to eat proteins. Most of us are not getting in enough protein. And yes, I used to be a power lifter. So my son was like, Mom, not everybody needs that much protein. I'm like, I'm not talking about 120 grams of protein. I'm talking a lot of people that I work with are, when I look at their diet, they're only getting in 20, maybe 30 grams of protein a day. And that's just not enough. You guys try to get 60 to 80 grams of protein in a day. And when you're only doing 2 meals, that looks a little different, right? So you need to try and get in at least 30 grams of protein per meal. Now, you want to eat protein first because I just saw a video I did a while back. I'll redo it because it explains this whole macronutrient thing and how it absorbs and how it affects your insulin. But proteins, so carbohydrates spike your insulin the highest, proteins spike it about half as much, and fats don't really spike it at all. But carbohydrates are the least satiating of any of the foods. Fats are the second most satiating, and then proteins are the highest. So we want to do proteins second, and you want to eat your food in this order too. Fiber first, and then proteins. Proteins are only going to spike your insulin about half as much as a carbohydrate would. Fibers first, proteins. Then, but they're also giving you good building blocks. Okay, so you need those to have healthy muscle in your body. I see so many people that I would call flaccid, and for a long time, I was wondering, why do people just look like they have no muscle on them? Because we've been leaning into this insulin resistant existence where we're not building normal muscle on our bodies. Then you want to get in healthy fats. So, and I'm not talking about canola oil and olive oil, or not olive oil, seed oils. You do want extra virgin olive oil. You do want avocado oil. You do want coconut oil. You do want butter, ghee, and then the fats that are on your animal fats. You get all of this in the ebook, by the way, so you don't have to like try and write it down. It's free. Just go download it. So fiber first, prioritize proteins, fill up with healthy fats. Now the next 3 principles are these. Limit your carbs. And I'm not saying you can't have them. If you really want drastic results, yes, then you're gonna really resist those carbs and bring it down. But if you're a normal person and you're like, hey, I have to live a life and I want this to be sustainable, limit them. That means pay attention to the breads that you're eating, and don't have cakes and candies and ice cream every single day. You can have them once in a while, just don't do it all the time. Okay, and then try to make sure that your carbohydrates are more natural, like opt for a pear instead. The 2 fruits that I love the most, and I probably need to add that to the ebook, are I love berries because they're high in fiber, lower in glucose or fructose, and then pears are one that I've just adopted recently because it's got that really high chlorogenic acid that this tea also delivers. Remember, good for the brain, but it's also good for your metabolism. Pears are high in fiber and lower in sugar. Waza, I love cake too. So we can address that really quick here. Let me get through the 6 simple principles, and then I'll address your love of cake. Okay, so Fiber first, prioritize protein, fill up with healthy fats, limit your carbs. And then the next two are do some intermittent fasting or time-based eating. We don't need to eat as much as often as we're being told. The food industry is actually who started saying eat every 2 hours. They're the ones who started saying all of these things that we have. There was no science behind the. If you have a scientific study that tells you that eating every 2 hours boosts your metabolism, I want to see it, because metabolic scientists and doctors who are experts in the field say it's destroying your metabolism. We don't need to eat as often as we do. I can still take in the same amount of calories in my 2 meals and really feel full and satiated and satisfied by those, and not have it spiking my insulin all day long. So it's not about the calories as much as it is about getting it in a timeline that allows you to have a time where you're feeding with insulin and a time that you're feeding with your own fat for fuel. So do some time-based eating, and there's numbers of ways to do it. The 16-8 is what we've adopted. There are many other ways, and I'm starting to talk about some of those other ways as I go through them. I just did a 5-day fast. The other thing, the last but not the least, I'm going to say it's probably like if we put everything else on one side of the scale, this last thing is probably the balance to those others, or the time-based eating and this thing, or the balance to all those other nutritional pieces. So time-based eating and move your body. So you need to move your body. Muscles that are active, muscles that need energy, are more insulin sensitive, right? They want that energy. The more we sit and don't move, the less our muscles need that energy. And so the more insulin resistant we're going to be. So isn't it crazy that we're moving less, but we're eating more? So we're putting more energy into a system that doesn't require as much. So, by the way, I'll address the cake first, and then we're going to talk about this other. So the cake, look, on the days, like I have birthday cake with my grandsons or my grandkids. My granddaughters are having birthdays next month, and so hopefully I'll get to go back to the West Coast and enjoy that with them. Do you think that I'm not going to have their favorite meal or their cake and ice cream with them when they're celebrating their birthday? No. I'm going to have one packet before my meal, and then before we have dessert, I'm going to have another packet to help protect me from those added carbohydrates. You can have 2 packets in a meal if you're having a high carbohydrate meal. I very rarely do that because I very rarely have a high carbohydrate meal, but when I do, I will. So you can still have cake once in a while. And then the other thing I want to say is, because it just triggered something in my memory. Like there was another influencer. She was also a power lifter. She would do pictures of her in Hawaii on a mountaintop with, basically naked with a cake, and like telling people they could eat whatever they want to just, stop this fat shaming and stuff. Well, let's understand that. Do you love your health more than you love the cake? I'm not saying you can't have it, but if you're saying I have to have cake every day, then you're probably not loving your health as much as you love that cake, and that's a problem. Okay, so now you had RNY, gastric bypass. You do eat about every 2 to 3 hours. Is that okay? So I have a number of people who've had gastric bypass, and the problem for me with gastric bypass is, again, you've already had it done. So this is not judgment, but I'm just talking to everyone else out there so that they can make a more informed decision, because most of us are not informed when we're told to do that. I have a number of clients who were not informed, some who did it, some who chose not to. You need to really make sure that your nutrient intake is heightened. And understand that with gastric bypass, if you're putting in excess sugars and thinking that the gastric bypass is going to fix it, you're going to gain weight later. You're going to have more problems later. You may end up with, like, iron absorption problems is the most common one that I've heard from people, but there are a number of problems. It's okay. We have a number of people who've been on the system, and eventually they're able to eat 2 to 3 meals a day. Now, if you can get it to 3 meals a day because you've had gastric bypass instead of every 2 to 3 hours, understand that you had gastric bypass to address a disorder that had to do with high insulin. Okay, so even though you're eating less food, you're still pumping food in every 2 to 3 hours. So I didn't cover this part. Let's cover it now. what the short line is, you could still do this and eat 3 times a day, cut it off. Make sure that the foods you're getting in are highly nutritious by following those principles I just talked to you about: fiber, protein, and fats. Those should be your meals. And you should, if you've had gastric bypass to lose surgery and you're concerned about that, your carbohydrate intake should be the very last thing on your mind. Okay. Now, so what's happening in your body when you eat a food, it takes a couple of hours for your digestive system to kind of get through that, right? And by that time, then about 3 to 4 hours, you're going to have a spike of insulin because your body's digesting that energy through. Okay, so unless you've eaten something that's not high in fibers, it can take a little while. Your energy is going to start to ramp up after you've eaten. But um, when that glucose level is high, is when your body starts to say, okay, there's too much sugar in the bloodstream now. We need insulin to come transport this to the cells, because your body should only have about 1 teaspoon of sugar in its bloodstream, or glucose in the bloodstream at a time. When we eat and that starts digesting through and you start having more than that, insulin has to carry it. So now your insulin comes up. So in a normal body, that's normal and that's fine, and the insulin will come back down. But what's happened is, you guys, we train our bodies in many, many ways. When we're eating every couple of hours, what we're actually doing is telling the body, I need insulin, so the insulin is coming out. And instead of insulin being allowed to come back down and feel like it can rest, in effect, what we're doing is saying, insulin, we need you there all the time, because we're going to eat every 2 to 3 hours. So you need to be there on the ready to take this energy out to the system. And so you're trained your insulin to stay high. This is when we start to have high insulin levels in the bloodstream. And now, every time you do eat something, that insulin level is already high, and you're pumping up that insulin level. And now the insulin level is like not coming down quickly, because it's like, oh, they're just going to eat again. So I got to stay here to do my job. When we start training it the other way, I'm not going to eat every 2 hours. I'm not going to be filling you full of stuff every 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is when we're snacking and all of that. Then the insulin can go, okay, I can come down, 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 I can come down. They didn't eat, oh, now they ate, I'm going to come back up. Eventually, over time, the insulin level is going to start to come down normally, and we start to become more insulin sensitive. But as long as during this time we're continuing to eat, pump it up. I'm going to come down. Oh, nope, they ate again. Insulin is high again. So now, got off track a little. You eat, your blood sugars go up within 2 to 4 hours after. It takes about that 4 hours for your blood sugars to normalize. It takes a couple hours after that, according to what I just was showing you, for insulin to come back down. So now when the insulin comes back down, a number of things can start to happen in your body. And that can take up to 8 hours for your insulin levels to actually come down far enough for the other things to happen. For most of us, that's during our sleep time, and most of us are not getting 8 hours of sleep, so we're disrupting even that. Insulin comes down, and the component hormone comes up, called glucagon. And the difference is, insulin, that one that we're training to stay high, is what they call anabolic. So that means it wants things to grow. And it takes precedence over almost every other hormone in your system, right? It regulates and tells the other hormones what to do, even your sex hormones. And so the component hormone, when you think yin yang, day night balance, right? The component hormone to insulin is called glucagon. It wants to eat things up. But if insulin is this big, powerful hormone and it wants things to build, as long as it's in the system, it's not going to let glucagon come out to play, because glucagon is trying to destroy, in its mind, everything that it's doing. So no, it won't allow glucagon out. We have to get insulin down. That's not going to happen for 8 to 10 hours after you eat, and then glucagon starts to come out. Now glucagon starts to come out. Now human growth hormone starts to be addressed. Now your digestive system is resetting. Now you start to produce a small amount of ketones. Now your body's being cued to start burning fat for fuel, and it really is in this great state of fat burning about hour 14. That's why we're waiting for 16 hours. So we're giving our body about 2 hours of really optimal fat burning time before we eat again. So that's why this whole intermittent fasting thing is important. So if we don't ever do that, then we're continually living off of insulin and we're never allowing our body to burn fat. We're always cueing our body to store fat. We're also training our body that it has to have insulin for energy. And so when people think they're hangry or all of that stuff, it's because the body's thinking it has to have this for energy and it can't use glucagon for energy. So D says, I've been diagnosed with diabetes, even though they told me I would never have to worry about it. That's pretty common. You did weigh about 260 pounds. Now you're about 165, and it has been 22 years. Yeah. But so now you've lost about 165 pounds and you're still diabetic. Did they tell you diabetic type 2 or type 1? Type 1, you would have been born with it and having problems your whole life. Type 2, you would have acquired it. Okay, so you can be thin and still have type 2 diabetes, and everything I just talked about is why. So 2 years ago, I was type 2 diabetic, 7.4 A1C. My blood glucose, fasting blood glucose was running around 260, insanely high, and my triglycerides were like 198. That was high too, right? So now my triglycerides generally run like in the 120s, 130s. My A1C is about 5.3, and my morning blood glucose is about 98. Those are all normal numbers. I'm not on any medications. I didn't do any strict weird dieting. I just do the protocol that I showed a minute ago, and that's it. So if you're still lean, this is, and by the way, this is not about weight loss. Weight loss is a side effect. When I do this, when I do the fasting, it's not about weight loss, it's about health care, okay? I'm almost 60 years old. My estrogen levels are down. My cortisol level has been high for years. My insulin is getting under control, but I still need to take care of a body that had been abused and under fire for 40 years. Does that happen overnight? No. So I'm taking extra steps because I want to live longer. I want to do a lot in this life, all right? So, what meds, Dee? I'd be really interested. She says she's on meds and she's about 165. Or you're, oh, with meds, you're at 165 blood sugar. Yeah, that still is too high in the morning, even on medications. So if you want, anybody, if you want a better solution that's not requiring all those medications, that, by the way, they've taken this section out. It really disturbs me that they've taken this out of the prescriber's digital reference that talks about all the damage that they can do to your body. So in most of those medications, what they used to list in there is that it can cause liver failure, it can cause kidney failure, it can cause a number of other things, including thyroid problems. And I've seen people who've had thyroidectomies after taking those medications, who've had liver and kidney problems after taking those medications. So if you want a better way, this protocol that I talk about is it. A tea in the morning, a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. And look, you just go to my profile link and then tap on the link there and you'll go to this page. I'm just going to show it really quick here. Sure. So this is it. The protocol that I use, if you tap on the links, you'll get to this page, okay? Dawson Mirowitz. So you're just going to go there and I'll show you really quick, everybody, because we have the question. So I'm going to answer that question. If you click on this top link where it says order the system, it's going to show you how to get the system. And it's really important to make sure that you're getting it through an authorized distributor because there's 60-day money back guarantee. There's a low price guarantee. There's a quality guarantee. You don't get those when you buy off of Amazon, eBay, Walmart. There's nobody on there that's authorized. You're not getting all of the support from someone like me or the company. So when you say see Michelle Fayant, that means you're going to get emails, texts from me. You're going to get support from me. You're going to get to reach out to me anytime you have questions. And then you click on buy now. So the system is this. It's a tea in the morning, and I didn't address this. You can have that tea hot or cold. It comes in lemon or lemon ginger. And then the pre-meal drink right now, special flavor is apple crush, and I love apple crush, so I would just get that. Orange tastes great, but you guys, you can get orange any time of year. Apple crush is only a limited time. I would leave it there. So you get 30 of the tea, you get 60 of the pre-meal drink. That's the system. 90 packets for 30 days. It does cost about $5 a day. So on a one-time purchase, it's $159. On subscription, it's $154, so you're going to save $5 off. You get free shipping. That brings it to about a $15 savings. You get this free hand mixer that I use every morning for my tea. And you get all of that for free with the subscription order. The subscription order, by the way, I'm going to close this down again. You can cancel at any time. They do send you out an email about 5 days before it renews so that you have time to make any adjustments or changes. And that's it. And then you get all the support from me that you need. And there we go. And by the way, one of the things I'm doing, because I've realized like there was a lot of things I didn't know and understand when I started. I really tried to. That's why I gave you the emails in the beginning, tell you to take your measurements, tell you to write down all your symptoms. You guys will be surprised at all of the symptoms that you're having now that you'll start to check off. I didn't do it because I mean, I wasn't thinking. I was just running, trying to live life. But a number of these, all of this are symptoms, actual physical ailments that the doctors hadn't been able to figure out that I've overcome. And then my ADD has gotten better. But all of this is stuff that I've been overcoming with this protocol. So you'll be surprised. I started it for weight loss and for diabetes. Both of those have been my diabetes is reduced. I've lost 50 pounds. We're good on that court, right? But my ADD has gotten better. My anxiety has gotten better. My depression, I don't have depression bouts anymore. I don't have chronic pain. And I have a knee that was supposed to get replaced last year and it didn't have to be replaced. So the system is not a panacea, but it will help you with all of the things that you may have. It can help you with all of those that are related to insulin resistance. So that's where you get it. And I'm here to support you through all of that. Okay, so back to question. Kidney problems starting, yeah. Okay, so D is starting to have kidney problems. And do you mind sharing with us which of the medications you're on? So you guys, when you're, these, Dr. Bickman does talk about it in this book. If you guys, if you want to invest, I think it's like $15 and really understand what your health is, this book will help you with that. So there's on my recommendations page is a link to get that book as well as Dr. Fung's books. But if you go to the PDR, which we can take a look at that if you want me to, if anybody wants me to look in the PDR, we certainly can. The prescriber's digital reference. These products are in there, but the medications you're on are in there as well. Dr. Bickman has a whole section in his book talking about these medications. Now, most of those medications are, if it's like Mounjaro, Ozempic, Trulicity, semaglutide, all of that stuff, they're all basically the same thing. And what they're doing is they're forcing your cells, those cells that are saying, I don't want insulin because you're annoying me, it's forcing those cells to take in more insulin. So that's lowering your insulin, your A1C and your blood glucose. It can also duplicate your fat cells, giving more places for the insulin to store. It's causing you to be nauseous so that you're not hungry. But in forcing these things to happen in your body, it causes dysfunction. Anytime you're forcing your body to do something unnaturally, there's going to be dysfunction, okay? The other thing is with those medications, it's forcing your body to put out more insulin through this glucagon-like peptide, or glucagon-like peptide. It forces your body to put out more insulin. Now, let's think about that. You're insulin resistant. Your body is already putting out too much insulin. Your pancreas is already under load because it's putting out too much of that. Now you're taking a medication that's forcing your body to put out even more to try and address the fact that your body is insulin resistant, but at the same time, it's forcing cells to take this excess insulin in, working harder on your pancreas, forcing cells to take in something they don't want to take in, and then your A1C and your blood glucose start to come down. But that hunger suppressing part of it, that nauseous part of it that makes you feel like, oh, I don't want to eat, that goes away within 2 years. Now on the sidelines, those fat cells are duplicating. It's called hyperplasticity in your fat cells. And some people say it's bunk, but no, it's not. Dr. Bickman talks directly about that those are forcing you to grow more fat cells. So now, after about 2 years, your hunger comes back. Your fat cells have duplicated, so now you're hungry like you were before because you haven't addressed the root cause, and you have more places to put it. So now you end up with rebound weight gain that's even higher, and your A1C and blood glucose are eventually going to go up, or they're going to continue to increase that dose and continue that cycle. Why do they have to continue to increase the dose? Because you're forcing your body to do something that it's not supposed to do because you haven't addressed the root cause. So address the root cause simply, effectively, and people like, I don't know if Cindy just passed through, if she's still in here, but Cindy's lost over 117 pounds on the system and is no longer pre-diabetic, all by just doing the protocol, okay? And she's not on any medications. Her husband was type 2 diabetic. He's off of his medications, and he's lost over 40 pounds. We have story after story of people just like that. By the way, Cindy, I don't know if I think you probably just passed through, but I'm going to find your picture. So this actually does work, and it gets you off of those medications. Now, one of the other thing is, so kidney problems are already starting. So the other thing is, thanks, Melba. So the other thing is, even with insulin resistance, you're starting to have, yeah, Plavix. Okay, a number of those medications are addressing the resultant of insulin resistance. If you want to, on that page that I showed a couple of times is also a way to contact me. There's my WhatsApp there. Just reach out to me and let's have a chat. Look, I'm not going to ever force or strong arm anybody into this. It's your choice. It's your health. But I will tell you that my recommendation is always this. There's a 90-day money-back guarantee on the system after seeing it do what it can do for everybody that it's done things for. Erectile dysfunction, kidney. We have a guy who had stage 3 kidney failure who was getting prepped to go have the pre-surgery to go on dialysis. He no longer needs to have that and is no longer in stage 3 kidney failure. So with a 90-day money-back guarantee and natural foods that aren't going to interfere with anything that you're currently doing, would you be willing to, or would you think it's the appropriate thing to maybe give yourself 90 days to see what can happen? If at the end of 90 days you're going to call back and say, hey, my numbers didn't get better, I'm not feeling better, I didn't like it, it's just not for me, and you can get your money back, would that be worth taking 90 days to see what you can do before all of this stuff gets worse? Because for me it was. For me it was. And I know for many other people it is. And look, if it works, hallelujah, amen. We're going to go on and we're going to be champions in your healthcare on the way out, on the rest of the way. But if it doesn't, then you simply get your money back, and I still will help you when you need, answers. But I would give it a shot. So contact me on WhatsApp if you need help. All right. So where are we at? It's 11. You guys, I was super late getting on here today, and I really apologize. I usually try to be on here between 8:30 and 9 in the morning. So much going on right now. Okay, one thing I was going to address, and I did not. You guys, I am in the middle of writing a cookbook, if you will. So I'm putting together a number of recipes that I use and finding some other recipes to expand my own that are actually really great to go along with this. Now, some of them will be keto, some of them will not. It's just a healthier way of eating by addressing those things: fiber, protein, and fats. Okay. But for everybody who's doing the system and has done subscription, I'm putting together a special section of drinks that you can do, that like little mixes you can make with this, so to change up your morning fasting that won't break your fasting. By the way, this does not break a fast. So I'm putting together some recipes or some combinations and suggestions to help you through that. And then, as well as, like, my morning breakfast this morning was our complete protein and some really healthy fats, like unsweetened peanut butter, avocado, coconut oil. Uh, it sounds crazy, but I made a peanut butter chocolate shake for breakfast. Super high in protein, really high in fats, very low in carbs. And it was an amazing, I am still full from it. So a lot of these things I'm putting together for you guys. And as a benefit to those of you who choose to do the protocol, I will be sending out some of this information to you. So there's that. Okay, it's 11. I do have a call to get on, and so I'm going to go do that. I'll be back around 3, and we're going to talk some more about heart health and this whole thing called insulin resistance. Dee, I would love to hear from you and see how we can help, okay? Everybody, Melba, thanks for joining in this morning. Oh, I didn't show Cindy's picture. Let's show Cindy's picture really quick. So this is Cindy. She's one of my gals, and this is the change in her. This is an old picture. I really need to update that picture because she's now down over 117 pounds. She's able to walk. She goes out and walks every day. Just completely transformed her life. So it's actually very, very possible, and this system is all she's changed. Karen is another one. You guys maybe know Steffi. I didn't think she needed to lose weight. She was always tall and lean, in my opinion, but she's now lost over 40 pounds, has 4-pack abs, and she doesn't do crunches or sit-ups or any of that. And she just does the system. But it's also helped her ADHD. Dia, a mama of 3 kids and cancer survivor, and she's doing fantastic on the system. Her husband is doing fantastic. This little guy, her son, type 1 diabetic youth. So yes, kids can do this as well. So you guys, it works. It just works. It just works. It just works. If I honestly, in all honesty, if it didn't work, I wouldn't be here talking about it. That's not my personality. That's not my reality. I am actually high functioning autistic. I cannot talk about stuff that I don't believe in. You guys, I wouldn't be here. So, Laura, you're very welcome. Melba, I know we'll see you soon, and I look forward to working with you when you get to that point where you make that choice. And you guys don't feel bad. Like everybody makes the choice in their time. I will be here, but some people have told me they've watched for 6 months before they were like, okay, I'm going to do this. Some people were like, oh, hey, this sounds like the best thing ever, and they start right away. When you're comfortable with what you're doing, make your choice, make the best choice for you, and come along for the best ride you've ever lived. Now we have Jason. So I'm going to show Jason since he's in here. Good morning and happy belated birthday. This man just had a birthday and he's now down over 160 pounds. He was one that was told to go have gastric bypass surgery. He opted not to. I need to get the stories of, I have a gal who did have gastric bypass and ended up on the system anyway. But Jason has lost over 160 pounds. His A1C, I think, Jason, is your A1C closing on 6 now, and it was 13.3. You guys, that's critical stage on your A1C. His hypertension, his hyperlipidemia, his sleep apnea, his chronic fatigue has all gotten better. He just sent me an amazing picture of him over the weekend, but it's on my phone, not on my computer, so I can't show you that. He's one of my champions. Amazing, knowledgeable man, and he's been so consistent. And every month it felt like I was just getting news after news after news from him on his health, and it just continues to get better for him. So I have amazing people who've done. He's getting his A1C tested soon, so we'll be able to update you with that. But not only that, but Jason has been able to change. When I talked about anxiety and depression earlier today, that's real for many, many, many of us. And when we have anxiety and depression, we tend to feel like it's us. It's all in our head because that's what we're told, right? If you would just shift your thinking, and there's some validity in that. But when you have a chemical disorder going on in your brain, and I've had multiple doctors tell me that, but not be able to explain to me why, um, why I would have bouts where I laid awake frustrated and crying at night, praying for God to take my life because I don't believe in suicide and I could never do that. That's my personality. But I would literally be like, please don't make me wake up in the morning. If you love me, God, don't make me wake up. I can't do this anymore. I don't have those nights anymore. So when there's chemical disorders in your brain brought on by insulin resistance, it can cause those feelings of depression and anxiety and helplessness. And it's not all in your head. I mean, it is. But it starts in the glucose that's in your bloodstream, ends up in insulin resistance. Jason, what I'm getting to is when I met Jason, lovely man, but he was kind of crabby. And he was just didn't have a very big, beautiful outlook on life. He does now. Jason is a huge proponent for the system. He talks to people all the time. He's consistently trying to save people's lives. Go follow him if you don't. He's not putting up consistent content yet. We're working on that. But Jason has already begun changing lives as well as his own. And his whole demeanor has changed since he's been on the system. And he's just such a joy. Like he's one of those teddy bear inside a grizzly bear when I met him, you know? So, you guys, it works. Just give yourself a chance and, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. I am not a judgmental person. I can be very direct sometimes. It's not out of judgment, it's just out of how my brain works. But I will do the best I can to help you. I'm answering questions all day, every day for people, whether they're on the system or not. Uh, but here's to your health. We'll see you in a few hours at about 3, and we'll talk some more about heart health today. Look for the videos coming out. I think we'll be starting with the video on the endothelium, but all week I'll be doing videos on how this causes high blood pressure as well as other cardiovascular diseases. And ask questions, because that's what I'm here for. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.